So I'm about to go on a documentary shoot, and it's a little bit different than some of my other documentary shoots because I'm going to be almost completely solo, meaning I'm going to not only be running a cam, but also be doing all of the audio. And it's very much a follow doc, so verite, observational, just following life as it happens. And so I wanted to build a rig that keeps me really lightweight, but also gets me really professional results and great audio at the same time. So I'm going to go through this rig piece by piece, all the different components and why I chose what I did for this particular shoot, and then also why I chose the Panasonic S1R II for this particular job. All right, let's get into it. First, the camera I chose for this shoot is the Panasonic S1R II with my trusty Panasonic S52X as my backup camera. And I chose the S1R II for quite a few reasons, but the most important is that it shares the same sensor as my traditional A-cam, which is the DJI Ronin 4D. And on this particular documentary, we've been using the Ronin 4D to get absolutely beautiful results, but often in settings where it's just us and the subject, or us and the subject and a couple other people, or on boats and sort of traveling around Florida. And so it's great to have that really smooth imagery. But on this particular shoot, I'm going to be solo by myself, and the Ronin 4D doesn't have the best audio inputs. It can only do 2 channels, and they're not the best preamps. Now, the Panasonic S1R II is a brand new camera from Panasonic, and in my opinion, they make the best mirrorless video cameras out there by a pretty wide margin. And there's a few reasons why I chose this specific model over something like the S52X or the S1H, both of which I also love. Number one is this actually shares the same exact sensor as the Ronin 4D. It's a beautiful 8K sensor. It has a dynamic range expansion, both off and on. So if you need a scene that needs a little more dynamic range, you can click that on and get that just like the Ronin 4D. Also, the Panasonic S1R II can record internal ProRes 422 HQ, which is what we've been shooting with the Ronin 4D, often downsampling that 8K sensor to 4K. So the fact that I can do that exact same codec in the same resolution as the Ronin 4D is beautiful and a really, really nice match. So because we've been using the Ronin 4D as our A-cam, all of the footage in this film is ultra smooth and incredibly steady. Now, a lot of mirrorless cameras have IBIS and stabilization, but they're just not that great. But the Panasonic S1R II has the best IBIS I've ever seen in any camera. It has incredible modes, including a cropless mode, which allows you to add a little electronic stabilization, but without cropping in on the sensor at all when you're using Panasonic lenses. Even though we're going to be doing a follow doc where I'll be hand-holding this on a sack or perhaps a monopod with my vest, this footage should be really, really smooth and cut nicely with the Ronin 4D footage we've already captured. Now, if you've been following the news on the Panasonic S1R II at all, then you know that it has a couple downsides. The first that a lot of people seem to be getting really caught up on is the rolling shutter. But honestly, with dynamic range expansion off, which works perfectly fine in 99% of situations, the rolling shutter is completely serviceable. Not as good as the Ronin 4D, but definitely on par with something like the S52X, or even better. And honestly, unless you're swinging the camera around like this, you're not really going to be able to notice a huge rolling shutter effect. So that's not a problem. The second that is a bit of an issue in certain contexts is overheating. Now, the sensor inside this camera creates a lot of heat and a lot of power, especially when recording to certain cards like CF Express cards. Now, the bigger camera, the Ronin 4D, obviously has more cooling, and then you can roll in pretty much any resolution for any amount of time, and that camera is going to be just fine. Whereas in a small body like this, even though it has internal fans, the body does get hot when recording to CF Express cards. But if you want to record ProRes 422, you can't record to the SD cards. You can only record H.264. So we do need to find a workaround to record ProRes in this camera. So let's get into this build out and show all the components I'm going to use on this shoot. First is this half cage, which I already have attached to the camera. And this is actually the half cage for the S52X, which fits perfectly fine, except it does block the battery door a little bit. You have to loosen it up in order to get the battery out. That's not going to be a problem for my build, which I'll discuss here in a few minutes. But the cage is awesome because it's a half cage, and therefore you can put components on the left side and the top, but the grip doesn't get any thicker. I actually really dislike full cages because of how chunky and heavy the side grip gets. And so the fact that I can just have the normal grip on there works out really well. And then a tripod plate on the bottom. And then because this cage does not have built-in NATO rails, I added a NATO rail on the left-hand side. This one's a little longer than the one I'll be taking with me. I'll find one a little shorter and then stick that there, but for demonstration purposes, that'll work. And the reason I have that here is because I'm going to be adding this, which is the Condor Blue SSD handle. And what's beautiful about this handle is not only can it be used as a top handle or a side handle, is that it also has an SSD built into it. And so this is a 2 terabyte SSD, which allows me to get over 8 hours of recording in 4K ProRes 422, which is awesome. Get that back in there. And then I can just slide this onto my NATO rail. And then that USB-C cable goes straight into the SSD and then comes around and can plug directly into the side of the S1R II. So now you're recording ProRes 422 directly to the SSD in this side handle, which also allows us to bypass using a CF Express card in the camera, which cuts down on creating heat and therefore potentially having overheating issues. Along with creating great images, it's also imperative to capture clean, beautiful audio. And that's where the Panasonic S1R II really shines, because it can be used with this new Panasonic XLR module, the XLR2. The beautiful functionality of this module makes it by far the best on the market. So just goes straight into the hot shoe on top of the camera, and so therefore the camera powers it, so no need for an external recorder. But most importantly is this XLR module allows you to record 4 channels of audio directly into the Panasonic S1R II, and not only that, it does it in 32-bit float. And if you don't know what 32-bit float is, most recorders record in 24-bit, which think of as like a 10-bit video file. Recording as a 32-bit float recorder means that you're recording basically a raw file of audio. You can pull back things that potentially could peak or be really low, and it'll still be really nice, clean audio. And having 32-bit float in a situation like this is really useful because I'll obviously be focused on the shots that I'm getting and not necessarily always riding my audio levels like a audio recordist would. And so knowing that this has 32-bit float allows the peace of mind that if things get a little too hot or if I am focusing on getting a great shot while not necessarily keeping an eye on my levels, it'll still be usable audio because of this recorder. All right, so I might have to record 4 channels at one time, including a shotgun mic on the camera, and then also 3 separate lavs. So how do we pull that off? Well, luckily the XLR2 can do that. The first is obviously a shotgun microphone, and this is my beautiful blue microphone that I love very much. It's small, but captures incredible audio, so that'll be number 1. And I have these really thin XLR cables, which I really like for setups like this because often XLR cables are actually pretty heavy and can bang around a little bit, but this thing is so small and thin, and then you just pop it right into your side. And then the lavalier system I've used for many years is the Sennheiser AVX system. So this is the body pack that will go on the subject, and then you'll hide this lav. Always hide your lavs, despite what I'm doing right now. But on a true documentary, true film, always hide your lavs. So that's the body pack. The beautiful thing about the AVX system is that this is the receiver. And so if you have something like the XLR2, then you can just stick this receiver directly into the XLR connector. And then that saves room on your rig. You don't have to mount anything else on some other cold shoe. Beautiful to have this directly on your rig. And if you were just doing a small documentary shoot where you just have to lav up one person, have a shotgun running, then you're already set and ready to go. But if you do have to add channels 3 and 4, then you're gonna want something like this, which is the Rode Wireless Go Pro. So DJI also makes a model very similar, as does Hollyland, but all of these sort of work the same, where you have a single receiver and then 2 transmitters that transmit to the receiver. And the nice thing again about the XLR Module 2 is it has a 3.5mm jack, which records onto channels 3 and 4. So your shotgun's on channel 1, your main subject is on your channel 2 on this lav, and then if you have other characters they're speaking with, then you can put them on channels 3 and 4 with a Rode Wireless Go 2. Now, like the S5 IIX before it, the S1R II uses these Lumix batteries. They last a good 2 hours, maybe even 2.5 hours on the S5 IIX. But because the S1R II has a lot more processing to do to downsample that beautiful 8K sensor to 4K and record in ProRes and record 32-bit float, it burns through those batteries quite a bit quicker. And so you're looking at about an hour to an hour and 20 minutes per battery, which is not a lot when you're on a verite doc shoot. You might be shooting for 10 hours and recording for 5 or 6 of those hours. I am putting in a dummy battery in the bottom, which connects to a USB-C port right here. So it just goes into the normal slot, comes out this little hole that they have right there, and then you just plug in USB-C power. I like to use V-mounts, so this is the FX Lion Nano 2. And then I have a little clip where I'll just stick on my belt, and this will just connect like so. And then you have all day power with a 98-watt battery. So this will last you probably 6 to 7 hours with the S1R II, and then I'll have a backup 98-watt or 50-watt waiting in the wings if need be, as well as carrying, 3 or 4 of those if I really have to go with the internal batteries. A couple other great features of the S1R II, which makes it really useful for this job, is that it has this beautiful screen that angles in all sorts of different directions. So not only does it flip out and flip around, but it also pops out. So if you wanted to keep it closer to the body, you could do that and still be able to tilt when you're shooting at different angles. So one other note on the power source, obviously a USB-C connector that doesn't have a locking pin of some sort is also not the most secure. It's not flimsy by any means. You can give this a good little pug and it won't pop out, but you don't want this to get snagged on something and get yanked out. And so what I'll probably do is not only tape those together, but then tape that down onto the back of my tripod plate to make sure that stays in place and is secure. You don't want your power cutting off in the middle of a shoot, that's for sure. All right, so there you go. There is my documentary setup shoot for this particular shoot, where I'm also going to be running audio and need to record in ProRes 422 to match the Ronin 4D. We got the Panasonic S1R II with the Tilta half cage that was made for the S52X. And then we have the Condor Blue top handle that has a SanDisk 2 terabyte SSD built into it, which is recording via USB-C to the Panasonic S1R II. Then the XLR2 module is on top, and that records in 32-bit float and also allows us to have 4-channel audio, 1 shotgun, 3 lavs. And the reason the Panasonic S1R II is such a great choice is because it has the same sensor as the Ronin 4D, which is our main A-cam, and it has incredible stabilization. So all of this built together is so that I can get the incredible image quality of the S1R II, which in my opinion is the best image quality in a mirrorless camera to date, and matches my A-cam, the Ronin 4D, very, very nicely, while also getting 32-bit float audio, which many audio recorders can't do. So what do you think of this build? Have you used the S1R II? Do you have your own lightweight Verite build that looks similar, or what would you add or subtract? Let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you in the next video.